Hey everybody, I just wanted to do a really quick rundown of what we had in our technology users group meeting last week. Now this was in mid-April and it was from noon to 1. It was a very, very busy time for a lot of people and so they couldn't make it. But the topic of Blackboard tips, tricks, workarounds is really, really popular. Had a lot of people ask me about attending sessions like this, and because of that I am going to go ahead and do it every semester so that everyone has a chance to get together. If you do know that you would really like to attend next time and you want to make sure that there's a time that works for you, just let me know what time works out best and maybe we'll do one during the day and one in the evening. But for this one, I know because it was a busy time during the semester and it was in the middle of the day, a lot of people couldn't attend, and so I did want to do a quick web rundown of some of the different tools and tricks that we talked about. Now remember, this session was an hour long, so it's going to be really condensed into a very small section. But at least you'll get the gist of what we talked about. If I kind of gloss over something and you had more questions about it or you want to explore the tools more one-on-one, just give me a holler. We can do face-to-face meeting, we can do phone, we can do web conference, and we can do that any time of day. So, you know, if you're working in the day and you need to do evenings, weekends, just give me a holler and we'll go ahead and go through some of the tools. So here, I'm going to go in the tech help site to show some of these things because there's a lot of content in here and I can play around with it a little bit more. But I will tell you that all of these things that I'm going to talk about first relate to Service Pack 6, which is an update that we did last summer. And a lot of people know that new features were added, but don't really know. They haven't really explored them very much. So that's what I kind of led off with. So if you look into course tools in the control panel, scroll on any course, you'll be able to see this. And a lot of times when we update the system, the new tools and features and just fun things are added to the course tools area. So if you click on there and you notice something different or something that has been added, go ahead and check it out, even if you're not exactly sure what it is, because a lot of times it's just something new that's been added. The first thing I wanted to do is point out the Add Test Student, and this is something that is valuable to almost everybody who teaches. In the past, you could look, if you wanted to get an idea of what your course looked like from a student perspective, you could turn your edit mode off in your content, but you still couldn't submit assignments, you couldn't check quizzes and tests the way that students actually see them. This will allow you to do that, so that's really important. So if you just click on Add Test Student, and for me, I've already created this test student before in another class, so it's just going to say, this is the one that's assigned to you, do you want to add it to this one? I say yes, and boom, I'm done. If you have not done this before, it'll tell you that your test student name it's going to be your regular username in Blackboard, and then an _S indicating that it's a test student account. And it'll automatically create that for you. You just have to put a password in and make sure that you write down your password so that you know how to access your student account. But just do something, you know, simple that you'll remember. And it'll go ahead and ask you then to go ahead and enroll it. You say yes. And now your test student is listed in that course. Okay. So what you can do at that point on is log out. You can go log in as your test student, and then you'll be able to see your course exactly the same way your students do. And that really gives it a whole different level of understanding to what your students are experiencing. And I've done this, you know, a million times. And the last time that I created a course in here, I went through every single aspect, and things like where you're going to place your assignments, or having one question per page as opposed to all of the questions on a single page in a quiz. I was surprised at how those things, as a user now, as a student, really kind of annoyed me and were a little bit bothersome, and that really does distract students when things aren't organized just right. And so you really get firsthand experience about what it's like to go through your course. You can also identify problems really quickly and really easily and kind of stay ahead of them before your students jump in there. So that's very helpful. The one thing I would tell you though is that I just added it for this course, but I have to do it for every single course. That's the only downside. And as you saw, it only takes 10 seconds to do, so it's pretty quick. But it is something that you have to do for every single course. At this point, it won't say, you know, list off all your courses and say which ones do you want this added to, unfortunately. So, but it's on our wish list. All right, so let's see. The next tool that I wanted to show you is the line checker. And that's also in Course Tools. Now, if you have links to an outside website, And it depends on how your course is organized and everything, but when you, a lot of times we'll link material because we can't, for copyright reasons, we can't download a lot of stuff, but you can link it. But the problem with that is that it's good in the copyright sense because the person who's publishing the material has complete control over it, and if they decide to get rid of it, they can, and you're still protected. The downside is that they can get rid of it, and all of a sudden you don't have content related to an assignment or a unit of study, or even if it relates in some way to a quiz or test. If that link goes away or if it gets moved, you don't usually know it until students come across it in the middle of class. And ideally, we're supposed to be checking all of our links before we start, the term to make sure that everything is working, but in reality, that doesn't happen. So what happens usually is the student will find it, and then all of a sudden we have to scramble and figure out, okay, what do I do as far as my assignments go? Do I have to rework the assignment? It becomes a big hassle in the middle of the term. So to stay ahead of that, if you click on that that link checker, then it will go ahead and show this page. And you can see that while I was talking about this, it took a really long time to load, so that's why I was distracting you. But mine, I clearly have a ton of links in here. There are lots and lots of links related to, because they're all tutorials. And since a lot of these vendors provide them, I can just link it up. Now you can see from this list, though, that it gives me the URL, the title of it, the location within the course, tells me if it's available, and then whether or not the link is valid. And if it's not valid, that's when I run into a problem. And so if I'm scrolling down here, and I can see that looks like everything's valid. If it's not, it's going to show up as a little red X here, and it's going to say that it's just not working. So at that point, you can click on it and see what the problem is. Maybe it got moved, maybe something else changed about it, and then you can go into the area of your content, where this is, and figure out how to make the adjustment, and then you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the term. So that's really nice. The other tool that was added is Rubrics, and I think everybody knew that when we moved shortly after we moved to 9.1 that rubrics were added, and all it was, and I'll go ahead and show you an example here, but it's just like any other rubric. A lot of us have these in Word documents and we just kind of attach them. They're there for reference. It's good for students to know what they're being judged on. But this one now, it's actually attached to an assignment or content area, so students can know exactly what they're being graded on, what the criteria are according to what you expect. And now you can actually grade it too. So these are highly interactive rubrics. The only thing that this one doesn't do, that I really, really wish it would, is allow students to actually submit their ideas of where they think they are in the rubric, and then that can be compared to the instructors and added to the grade book. And that's a little bit further down the road, but hopefully you'll be able to have that functionality as well. But for now, instructors can grade it, and it can be attached directly to the Grade Center. So in order to do this, you can just create a rubric. If you have it from another class, you can import it as well. But if you go in, and I'm just going to go in and edit my rubric here, and you can see what it does is it has levels of achievement here and then criteria, and you can change anything. It has novice, competent, proficient. I can go ahead and change what that means. I can modify that title. It also defaults to points, but if you use point range, which is usually when I have a discussion board rubric, that's what I do. So if you click on point range, then you can identify that, okay, 8 to 10 points is a really stellar post, 6 to 7 is, it's okay. And you can also adjust these criteria here as well. So you can provide a lot of detail. The really nice thing about these rubrics, especially in talking to all of the faculty that I talk to all the time, is that a lot of people have rubrics for things like discussion boards or written assignments, essays, things like that. We all, I wouldn't say have the same criteria, but certainly have a base that's very similar. And so what you can do is if somebody in your department has a rubric that they use that you think is really great, you can import that into your class if they go ahead and give that to you. And then you can modify it and tweak it any way you like. And just from my end, I have a great one that I used for discussion boards for years, and I'm more than happy to share that with anybody. So just give me a holler if you want that one. But I can go ahead and send that to you. You can actually get into my course, copy it, and use it. So if you have departments that want to share, or they all have criteria that they all agree on, then that's a really great way to share that information. Okay. The only other tool in here that I did want to discuss that's relatively new is Grade Center due dates. And I think a lot of people don't realize that this one is here, and it can be a huge time saver at the very beginning of the term. Used to be that if you had grades in your set up with each column in your Grade Center, you had to go into each individual column and hit edit, change that, submit it, and then, as you know, it takes a few seconds for the Grade Center to come back up. And then you have to go to the next column and do it again, and which is fine if you have 10 grades, but if you have 35 and you have 35 for 5 classes, it just really gets to be a bear. So what was happening is a lot of people were either just leaving it completely blank, which is also fine. That's not a problem at all. Or they would just leave the dates that were in there, and so you may have dates that are in there from 2008, 2009, and students get really, really confused. They think that you're using old material, and they don't get, they wonder if they're the right class. I've had students actually call and say they think they've somehow stepped into the past, and it's because if you add your test student and you look in My Grades, you'll see why they think that, because it's a pretty prominent column over on the side there, and so that's when they get confused and they think that there's something else going on. So they should be checking their syllabus or their course schedule for due dates. We all know that, but when they get accustomed to working online, they just tend to look in their Grade Center so often for everything, and that's kind of how they're processing it. So but like I said, it was a huge pain to do that. Well, now you can actually change all of your due dates on one listing, which is really, really nice. So I have just a whole series of random assignments in here, and they're all marked to be available, but I can mark them as unavailable if I choose. And all I do is click on the calendar here, I identify the date that it's due, and I can do that for all of them. So I can just pop in, and it takes a couple of minutes depending on just how many you have, but far less time than it used to. So that can be a huge, huge time saver. You hit submit, and then when they look in My Grades, they're going to be able to see those dates. Also, if they click on homepage, or if you direct students to the homepage when they first go into the course, there is a widget there that, I'm sorry, I don't have it on mine, but looks like I cleared it. But there is one that says that there are due dates for things that they have coming up, and it'll say for today, for tomorrow, for next week, and those will show up when they click on their homepage. So that's just kind of another way to get that, push that information out to them. So that's very helpful as well. Okay. One of the questions that came up, and I'm so glad that this was brought up because I never even really thought of it this way. One of the issues that a lot of instructors have when they're trying to work face-to-face with students is if they pop into your office and they ask, I have some questions about my grades, I want to run through some things, and you want to be able to pull up your Grade Center and talk with them about it, but when you do that, you click on Full Grade Center, you will see everybody's grades on here, which clearly is going to be a big problem if you're trying to talk to students. So there are a few different ways to go about this, okay? Number one, if there is a student that you check with all the time and who's always coming in to talk to you, you can actually create a smart view down here that will show up, and let's say it'll be, Sally Johnson. And if you click on that, all of her grades are going to show up, and only her grades. So if you set it up that way, you can do that. But for the most part, we don't really have students who are constantly coming in, I hope. But there are a couple of other ways to do this. And one of them that was discussed is actually creating a grade report. So if you click on Create Report, and you can go ahead and type up, a student's name. We'll keep going with Sally. And you fill in, just check through the information, and it says, which users do you want? And I'll say, well, I'm going to select my users, and let's pretend Stephanie's name was Sally. Click on her, and then it says, do I want all of the columns? Yes, I want all of this stuff. And then when you get to the bottom, if you just click Preview, you can hit Submit, and it'll generate this report. You can print it out, you can hand it to the students, and say, call me if you have questions. But if you preview, then you can just look at it on one screen with them. Now, the advantage to this is it's pretty quick, it's pretty easy, and it does give you all the items available here and the grade. Downside, though, is that it does not give you why. And that's usually why they're there. They know what their score is, but why do they have that score? And if you put something in the comments, or if it's a test or a quiz, you want to be able to look at the answers and figure out why. Why did a student have that problem? If that's what you need to do, then this is not the route you want to go on. What you'll want to do is if you go to the Full Grade Center and you go down to Manage, and you will see row visibility. And a few people in this session mentioned that this is the route they went and it wasn't going the way they wanted it to. Well, what they were doing, which I imagine is what a lot of people are doing, is hitting show rows here. Well, those rows are already all showing. So clicking that isn't going to do anything. It's just going to leave it exactly the way it is. What you actually have to do is hide all of the rows. So you click hide, or I'm sorry, you click at the box at the very top here to select everybody's. If I only want to look at Stephanie's, I unclick that, I hit submit. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's try that again. I think I must have missed something here. Let's try it again. Okay. Hide the rows. Okay. Oh, I needed to hit submit. Maybe I did that. Okay, there we go. So I can see that just her grades are here. So at this point I could say, okay, come on over, let's take a look here and, figure out what happened, figure out what you did. And if I've got comments, again, I can just, show here, hit view grade details, and then we can get a real in-depth look of, how your student was doing and what they're struggling with. So that's probably the easiest, quickest way for that. The only other thing that came up, and this was just because we were using this course as an example of a few things, and some people started to notice that the way that this text site is set up is a little bit different from the way other sites are set up. So if I turn the edit mode off, and I can see, for example, this may look very different from the way that your class is set up. So I've got, in this section, this is what you're going to find, and it may be kind of hard to see with the lighting here, but this whole area here is actually kind of a grayish area separating it from the rest of the information. And when you click on this area, then you'll be able to see. See, now you can see the way I have it set up. There's a description here with the picture that I have attached to it rather than a written description, which is what a lot of people tend to have. I have a what's in this section area. I have the levels of the use of Blackboard. And this one, and again, it may be kind of hard to see here, but this area all up here is all gray, and then everything below it is white. And the reason why that is if I turn the edit mode on, you can actually see that I didn't use a content folder the way a lot of people do, and I didn't use a module, which is the other option. So when you create your content areas, I'll show you real quick about some of your options here when you're, when you're creating your content. When you roll over build content, most people go to item, file, and content folder. Some people have been going to learning module because that creates a table of contents for you, and your students can click on it and move through the content pretty easily. That's a very nice organizational feature. But what I did was I went to lesson plan, because what lesson plan allows me to do is create a two sections here. It's got content information and curriculum resources. And for anything, especially if you teach online, that's really nice because you can provide, your detailed description, but it also gives you different levels of information. So it comes with defaults, but I put, what's in this section. There is one that says objectives. There's one that says time frame. If there's any information that you would expect students to have at the beginning of a unit, this is a good way to organize it because it does give a different look to it. The downside is it doesn't have a table of contents in it, and a lot of people have really gotten to like that from learning modules. So what I would say is just kind of play around with it and decide what you think works best for you and for your students. The other thing that they noticed is that I don't have those icons in mine. I really don't care for those. The little piece of paper and the folder, things like that right here, I just didn't like that. I wanted to get rid of it. So if you also don't like it, go down to Packages and Utility, I'm sorry, not Packages, Customization, go down to Style, and this is where you can make adjustments like, your content buttons and your folder view. And a lot of people gloss right over this. This is your default content view. It always starts with icon and text, so it includes both of these elements. But if you click on text only, it gets rid of the icon. And as long as your text is clear about what it is, then that's fine. It can be, just makes it a little bit cleaner. You can also change your course entry point here, so just to know that when students click on mine or click on this, they come to the home page first. So just know that those things are available. There's also a banner that you can include in your class. So these are all things I can go over with you in more detail later. But that's all I had really that we discussed. There are, other issues. Some copyright things came up. Doing PowerPoint stuff came up as well. I had a really good question. I just remembered this. For the link, when the external link checker, if you have links that are in a Word document or a PDF or a PowerPoint, those will not be checked. Okay, it's only going to check the links that are set as a URL in your content. So that, really watch out for that, because that's what that means. It will check anything that, if you link it as you go to build content, you hit URL, and that's what you use to create your link to your content. That is what it will check. It won't check it if it's embedded in some of your own content. It can't go that deep. So just kind of be aware of that, depending on how your course is organized. And that's all I had. So if there are any other questions or issues you have, just don't hesitate to give me a holler. Thanks, everybody.